I think it just ties into the way how, you know, the phrase where people say society punishes the parent who stayed. Now, of course, in
Yes.
this scenario, we're not accusing Fola of being an absentee parent necessarily. Potentially may have passed away. But I think you can do a movie talking about two brothers and their grief for their father while acknowledging the one woman who this movie even concedes that she is the one that kept this whole family alive. And while I was just watching this play out, all I could think was there's a woman who doesn't know where her children are, potentially. Um, she doesn't know where her children are. She's been working all day. She's working her ass off. She's crying at night because her partner, probably she even knows about the affair if you assume that this is a real life story or like a real story and not a dream. And the movie is not even giving her any sort of acknowledgement almost. I don't think it had to be this way where women, literally, I think women probably spoke for all of 2 minutes. That's it in the whole movie.
No, stop it, D, stop it.
I'm being very serious.
There's also Auntie Shay that sees them in the bar. She has a whole conversation with both him and the boys.
We
And
don't.
there's all the various food vendor women who are flirting with Fola.
And in fact, let's speak about that very quickly as well, because there was a scene where they were on the bus leaving the village to go to Lagos, and they zoom in on a woman's chin hair at one point, and little stuff like that. I was just like, I don't know that I like the way how gender's being handled here, but I do understand that ultimately this is naturally a masculine movie. But because I have references like Moonlight, which again you can say, as you've mentioned, it's a different level of filmmaking maybe. But because I've seen it done so well before, I think it just didn't land very well for me. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I enjoyed the movie.
I also kept on thinking that when am I going to see the equivalent of this for like specifically black women's relationships with their mothers? Because I feel like
Mm.
when you see stories about motherhood, many times it's either like about some sociopath serial killer guy that hates his mom and how that drove him to becoming a serial killer, some Bates Motel psycho kind of stuff, or it's all about like this divine grace mother glory perfect figure that protects her children through the worst that happens to them, and she's just sacrificing herself over and over and over for them, and the children just like love her purely
Yep.
and all of that. And as a person who has a very complex relationship with my own mother, and I have many female friends who also have complex relationships with their mothers, I'm like, when do we get to see that story
Like,
of like, to be very honest, girls that love their mothers but don't necessarily always like them, and not in a
yep.
misogynistic way but in a real life, what mothers end up inadvertently doing to their daughters because of trauma that they haven't healed from. Now, there are stories like this that exist, but do they really exist for like black women properly? Like Precious, I guess. But Precious is also doing trauma porn, and it's
Yep.
also commenting on class in a particular way. It's not
Mm-hmm.
really, in my opinion, fully delving into the emotional. Also, that is almost like a cartoonishly evil mother
Yes.
figure.
Mm-hmm. It's the reverse of this, actually.
Yeah, like I'm very interested to see those stories for black women, for African women, for Caribbean women. I'm looking forward to when we get to see them more.
But we know why it doesn't exist because black women don't get the same grace as black men. We don't get the same grace.
I wanted to talk about the concept of sacrifice, because that was another thing that hit me really, really hard when I first watched it. Is that there's a line that Fola says that in life everything is sacrifice. You just have to pray you don't make the wrong one. And as a person that has just spent this last year of my life throwing away rational decision making or responsible quote unquote decision making and taking leaps of faith and leaps of hope, basically, knowing that there's stuff I'm giving up by making those risks and just praying and hoping that those sacrifices and those risks are worth it. It really, like, there were certain things they would say in this movie that would just casually devastate me, and that was one of them. That line, when I heard it, I was like, oh, like I was like, oh my god, it actually like kind of knocks the wind out of me. There was also another moment, I think, where Fola says Nigeria is hard, and he just says it. I've spoken to so many Nigerians about this film, and they all say a very eerie thing about watching this movie is that even though it's set 30 years in the past, every single thing that all of the characters are saying, we all still say it right now. And so much of the imagery after the annulment day is so reminiscent to them of what happened on October 20th, 2020 in Lagos, and how disturbing it is to hear these characters having all this hope that gets deflated, but constantly referencing the fact that hopefully it will be better in their children's generation, and we are living in their children's generation and it isn't. I've spoken to a lot of people who said that seeing this film helped them understand why our parents' generation kind of gave up. We get so frustrated with them that why won't you guys sit up and do something? Like why have you allowed things get like this? Or why don't you understand why we are so agitated about the state of the country? And it's like because they were agitated and they got all the hope knocked out of them and it literally traumatized them, and they are kind of like completely burnt into a husk of cynicism and disillusionment. And it's just been very interesting reflecting on the story in that way. Like I said, I watched this movie and it's covering events that I wasn't born yet for, and yet I felt like I was remembering them. It's a very, very particular feeling to experience as a West African. I've never really experienced it before in my life watching a film.
So, admittedly, I'm not very educated on what happened with regards to the election in 1993. But what I did find interesting is obviously you very kindly basically gave me a whistle stop tour of Lagos a couple years ago. And what I found so interesting watching it, especially when I realized this was about a past event, was the fact that some of the issues that were going on back then are still very much relevant today. So whether that's having issues with accessing oil, what I found interesting about that is I could see in this movie that this is someone who probably loves Nigeria a lot and loves Lagos a lot. I think this movie did a great job of really introducing, like, I almost feel like Lagos is a character in this movie. Even if I hadn't been before, I feel like this movie would have really transported me to it. But as someone who's been there before, I felt like I was right back there in the chaos and in the bustle of it. There's a love for the country, there's a love for the city, but there's like a real resentment for the fact that there are issues and that they are not being solved.